2016년 미국 대통령 선거가 다가오고 있습니다. 대통령 후보들은 여러 주들 중 스윙스테이트라 불리는 특정 주들의 표심을 사로잡기 위해 혈안이 되어 있습니다. 2012년 대선 당시 오바마 대통령과 롬니 공화당 후보의 일정 중 90%는 대표적 스윙스테이트인 오하이오, 플로리다, 콜로라도, 네바다, 아이오와 버지니아 등 10여 개 주에 집중되어 있었습니다. 이처럼 후보자들이 스윙스테이트에 집중하는 이유는 스윙스테이트가 선거인단 시스템 하에서 선거의 향방을 가르는 핵심이기 때문입니다. 미국은 선거인단이라는 다른 나라와는 다른 독특한 시스템을 가지고 있습니다.
The Electoral College is a very strange mechanism.
Strange institution in the American Constitution.
No other country does this like we do it.
And even most Americans don't know what the Electoral College is. In the United States, presidents are not elected directly by the voters. They are elected indirectly through the states. American Constitution was written. It was right after the American Revolution, and Americans were deeply suspicious of centralized power. They created a complicated government to diffuse power. They left a lot of power at the state level. Those were the original colonies. They are now called states. But then at the national level, they created three branches of government: the presidency, the Congress, and the court system. But even within the presidency, the Congress, and the courts, they created divisions. So the Electoral College is an example of what we in America call checks and balances within the election of the president. So the founders didn't want a president elected by all the people. They wanted public opinion to be filtered through the Electoral College. So when people go to vote for an American president, they're voting within a state for the electoral votes of that state. There are 538 electoral votes if you add up all the states, and you have to have a majority, and that's at least 270 votes.
In the Electoral College, you have these electors. Ohio has 18, 16 in the House of Representatives, and 2 senators. So if you win the state as a presidential candidate, then you win all of those 18. Even if it's a close vote, you still win all 18. So every presidential candidate knows you have to win this state to win those electoral votes.
미국의 대통령은 투표자가 직접 뽑는 것이 아니라 주의 선거인단을 통해 뽑기 때문에 선거인단 확보는 중요합니다.
Many of the big states with a lot of electoral votes, we already know that it's going to be Democratic or it's going to be Republican.
Because the American presidential elections occur at the state level, they're really state elections. There are some states that are solidly Democratic. An example of that is the state of California, very Democratic state. Some states are very, very Republican. Another one, a good example of that's the state of Texas. But then there are what we call swing states, states that can go either way. That when one election might vote Republican, one election might vote Democratic. Sometimes use the word swing state because they can swing back and forth. Sometimes they're called bellwether states because they predict the outcome of the election very accurately. Sometimes they're called battleground states because that's where the campaigns are really the fiercest. Swing states are important because those are the states where the election is determined. Swing states are the key states that allow the Democrats or the Republicans to win the election.
The vote is probably going to be very close between the two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And so because it's almost 50-50, the candidates for these parties to become president really focus on that state. And they want to win that state. Because for the Electoral College, it's very important to get 51% of a state. You don't have to get 100% of a state. You can't do that. But if you can win 51% of the state, then you get all of the electors. Most of the states. It's a little complicated, but most of the states.
플로리다, 아이오와 등 전통적인 스윙 스테이트들이 있지만 그 중에서도 오하이오주는 특별합니다.
Ohio has been the most advertised state in the last 2 presidential elections, by far.
Historically, Ohio has been at the center of the list of swing states. Right now, Ohio is very important because it's a swing state and it's one of the large states. It's the 7th largest state in the United States. Now, one of the key things about Ohio is that no Republican has ever been elected president without winning Ohio. The state of Ohio decided the presidential election in the 2004 presidential campaign.
Voters waited as long as 2.5 hours today to cast their ballots.
People waiting in line for 9 hours.
In fact, I was here at the University of Akron watching the election results with my students, and shortly after midnight, Ohio was declared for the incumbent Republican President George W. Bush, and that allowed him to win the election. Without Ohio, he would have lost. And it was the very last state to be called. It was very exciting. Many people were, of course, unhappy because they wanted the Democrat to win. The Republicans were excited. But it really came down to the votes in Ohio, and President Bush won re-election in Ohio by about 118,000 votes, which was about 1% of the vote cast. So it was very, very close election. There was a recount, and it turned out that Bush had won.
이 때문에 미국에는 오하이오가 가면 미국이 간다라는 말이 존재하기도 합니다. 어째서 스윙 스테이트는 정치적 성향을 가지고 있지 않은 걸까요?
Well, the key to swing states is diversity. And Ohio is a very diverse state. It's a difficult state to campaign in, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Northeastern Ohio is very Democratic. Southwestern Ohio is very, very Republican. And then there's everything in between. You go to any other swing state, states like Colorado or Virginia or Florida, they have a similar diversity within them. That's what makes a state competitive.
핵심은 다양성이었습니다. 다양성 때문에 오하이오주는 미국의 축소판이 될 수 있었던 것입니다. 2016년 미국 대통령 선거, 오하이오주는 또 한 번 대통령을 결정할 수 있을까요?